Hi everyone, welcome today to our reaction to the autumn budget 2024. I'm Ross, the director at Hive Business, and I'm also pleased to welcome my fellow tax director, Simon.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks, Ross.
Great, thanks. Well, we've had Rachel Reeves stand up and deliver her budget now. She definitely kind of set her cards out early on. Very much talking about how the previous government for the last 14 years has left it to kind of rack and ruin, and how she's got the difficult job of kind of squaring the books up and aiming to fulfill a deficit of as much as 40 billion pounds. So we're going to talk a little bit today about our initial reactions to the details that have been released. Quite often in these scenarios, more detail is released later, but let's see what's happened so far today. Simon, what's the kind of the headlines from your perspective?
Thanks, Ross. I think perhaps the biggest surprise, actually, because we thought this was an easy win for Labour, is they haven't made any changes to pension allowances. So, as far as we know, sat here now, £60,000 is still the annual limit, and there's no lifetime limit. So,
Yeah, great.
kind of great news.
So we had that increase from £40,000
Yeah,
annually to £60,000 of the Conservatives. They haven't reversed that. It looks to be still 60.
that's the case. Yeah. And like I say, a lot of the detail hasn't come out, but also perhaps a surprise is that a lot of what's been announced isn't applicable till April 25 or beyond, which is unusual for budgets. We often see some measures applicable immediately, which we don't really have. Other
Yeah.
than one
Feels like
warranty.
yeah, I think you kind of started with what hasn't changed, which feels like a little bit of good news in these scenarios. What else hasn't changed?
Yeah, I agree. So no changes to income tax rates or thresholds, no changes to dividend taxes, no changes to corporation tax, no changes to VAT, no changes to national insurance paid by employees. So ostensibly, what everybody's earning kind of stays the same from a tax point of view, which is
A kind of fabled triple lock and
yeah,
everything that they seem to trying to preserve. They have preserved with a little bit of a kind of a loophole, I suppose, that we'll talk about later. But yeah, nothing's changing. Income tax locked in place, but change forthcoming.
yeah. So previous government had announced a lock in not the rates, but the allowances of income tax. So personal allowance has been frozen at just over 12,500 for several years now, and Tories had pledged to lock that in for another couple of years from here on in. Labour are going to stick to that, but they are promising that thereafter there will be a inflationary increase in allowances, which will be welcome news to everybody when we get there in about 2 years' time,
Okay.
4 years' time.
That's all sounding quite good so far, isn't it?
It is, yeah, actually. I think it's obviously been their strategy over the past 3 months, all the doom and gloom we've had to prepare us for an awful budget that is maybe not so bad, depending on
Yeah.
your circumstances. There have been a few stings, though, that, you know, the big one, I guess, being capital gains tax. We always knew there were going to be some changes to capital gains tax ever since the Labour manifesto came out during the election campaign. They refused to outrule any changes. We've kind of been expecting them. We've got them. We now know what they're going to be. The good news is they don't start until April, so there's potentially a chance to do something about that with a bit of time to plan it. But what is happening is the rates are increasing to 18 and 24% instead of 10 and 18%. So lining up with what you might be used to as the residential rates, the rates on disposal of residential property. No mention of, again, allowance.
Cool. Okay, so just to be clear, the main rate of capital gains tax going from 18% to 24%.
Yeah,
Business owners, it's going from 10 upwards now.
yeah, yeah. And alongside that, what we used to call entrepreneurs relief, now renamed to business asset disposal relief. That remains £1 million
Yeah.
worth of lifetime gains. That's still 10% up until April. From April, it's 14%, and the year later, it's 18%. So it's aligned with the new basic rate of capital gains tax. So again, maybe some
Wow.
great
Feel
opportunities.
I feel like we might have been conditioned to brace ourselves for something like 39% CGT there, and it feels almost like a relief now. So fair play to their
Yes.
kind of like game playing there, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think really that, other than national insurance changes, which, we've kind of alluded to what the sting in the tail, that's really
Yeah,
the only big change. I might just kind of subtly mention inheritance tax, which
yeah.
is again subject to some freezes. So nil rate bands of being frozen, 325k per person, 500k if that includes a residence being passed to the next generation, double if there's a spouse's allowances in there. What is changing is pensions are becoming taxable under inheritance tax, which could be very painful for some people. And what we know is business property relief and agricultural property relief, although less relevant for people watching this video, are being reformed. Those are the reliefs which say actually your business assets are not subject to inheritance tax, and assuming the right conditions were met, that just kind of meant, well, your shares in your limited company just aren't going to get taxed when you pass them down. That's changing. So it's going to be a 50% relief instead of 100% relief from April 25.
Oh.
So
And I might just interject with a little bit of stamp duty as well, if that's all right. Because that is actually one that's walloping straight away.
yeah, from tomorrow, the additional rate of stamp duty that second homeowners buy, also applicable to limited companies, is increasing from 3% to 5% for residential property, where you already own a main residence or where you are a company buying residential property.
So increasing by, well, if it was already kind of a 3% premium, it's now 5% premium.
Yep. That particular.
Excellent. I also saw kind of hidden away in the depths business rates. So for our small business clients as well, the business rates being preserved a little bit. So currently there's kind of a maximum 75% exemption from what I understand. There will be a preservation of a 40% discount for eligible businesses. So I don't know, kind of bittersweet again there that small businesses are getting some relief, but they may go up, basically.
Yeah, obviously we're heading to a cliff edge when previously announced reliefs ended, so they're trying to smooth that out a little bit.
Excellent. Probably to take a detour because I'm avoiding the great big elephant in the room before we get there. VAT on school fees still kicking in, Simon, is it?
Still kicking in from the 1st of January, as announced back in July. Anecdotally, I've heard from a number of people that their schools are expecting the VAT charge to amount to about 11% and not 20%, just due to how they categorize which parts of what you're paying for do and don't suffer VAT. So the educational part does, but maybe meals don't, for example. But yeah, still applicable from January.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll continue to kind of hear more from our clients as to what the actual kind of increases are when they kind of come in and kick in. Yeah. Anything else kind of worthy of mention for the Titbit side of things, or is that kind of cover the ground kind of quite nicely?
I think that covers most of the important things. Obviously, loads of stuff sprinkled in and around there. Quite a long speech in the end of it. Usually about an hour, but it was about an hour and a half. Lots of taxes that aren't relevant to the kind of small businesses, like we'll be watching this video and like we deal with oil and gas levies and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that covers most of it. Onto the elephant in the room, I suppose.
Yeah, and I got to be kind of pragmatic to a certain extent. I think she kind of delivered it quite well in a sense that, national insurance for employers has increased and is it's a pretty big part of how she's kind of closing the tax gap there, reading that it's a pretty significant proportion of, the rest of the tinkering. But the one that's really kind of walloped is the national insurance tax on employers. So can you just kind of describe that in a little bit more detail? Because she giveth with one hand and she taketh with the other a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. So employers' national insurance is paid by everybody who has employees. It's an extra cost on top of an employee's salary. So if you're paying your nurse 30K, for example, there's national insurance on top. Previously 13.8%, rising now to 15%. Previously also didn't kick in until that person had a salary of 9K, kind of spread throughout the year. Now kicks in at 5K. So a little bit more tax paid by a few more people. Like you say, give with one hand,
Kind
take
of
away.
fighting at both ends almost, isn't it? Like, so the rate's gone up, but it also capturing more for lower paid employees, I suppose, is the way of viewing it.
Yeah, bit of a double whammy. I think we have calculated actually for the average kind of nurse. I use a nurse as an example, but for the average nurse, about £1,000 a year cost to the business, which is in itself tax deductible, so maybe an £800 increase. But there's a little sweetener with it. So we also have something called the employer's allowance, which is essentially a credit against employers' national insurance. Previously about 5,000, now 10.5. So, maybe 5 employees aren't actually costing you any extra, which is a nice way to put it.
Okay, so let's get that kind of context. So if you're a dental practice with 5 employees, your national insurance burden is going up by about £1,000 an employee. You've got 5 employees in your business, so this employment allowance kind of offsets that element of things.
Yeah, I think the stats given out were, about 800,000 businesses will actually be better off with this new structure. 1 million will be no worse off. For everyone else, there's a cost to suck up.
Yeah, so if your dental practice has got 10 employees, you are going to be impacted and there is going to be a cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think in reality that will probably capture most dental practices where they've got more than 5 employees paying the national insurance amount on them. But not done a bad job really of kind of distracting us from the pain there, I suppose.
No, I think, like you say, we've had 3 months of rhetoric about how this is going to be awful, and I think it could have been a lot worse for a lot more people.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll see this play out. If we find out more details as we do them, we will obviously kind of release them through the usual kind of channel. So hopefully that makes sense. Anyone wants to get in contact and see how it specifically applies to their own kind of tax position, or if there's any tax planning people want to undertake, particularly regarding the kind of the capital gains tax now, please do get in contact. I'm sure, Simon, you'd be happy to help people kind of navigate through this. Probably just as a little Brucey bonus, because it was recognised with cheers of joy in the house when it was released there. But Rachel's done such a great job. She's reducing the duty on a pint, so that from next year we're all going to be enjoying a penny off a pint. So great job, well done. I'm really pleased to be looking for my penny off my pint next year, as I'm sure you will as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Definitely happy to help. I think there's a few opportunities to have a look at a few things before April, when capital gains tax rates increase for a lot of people. So do get in touch. Happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you all.